This conference will now be recorded.
We'll call to order, Monterey Select Board August 6th at 6:02 PM. And we're all here in town hall, which is good. I don't know. I really don't.
You're not counting the days, Justin?
When is the one?
September 7th.
Okay, well, you get them up.
Yeah.
That last week hits you hard no matter what you did. Unless you elope, that's the only exception.
So the first, this is gonna be a shorter meeting. Actually,
Please don't say that to me again.
But,
That's probably not a good idea. to
Please
say
do,
that.
every time you say that.
but the first order of business is starting a conversation about ARPA funds. And this was brought about for a couple reasons. One is we have till the end of the year to allocate funds. And
The 2020, FY 26 or
I think
at
it's
calendar year
December
25.
31st.
Really, I don't know, why did I think it was 2025?
To spend, maybe.
Okay.
I also was reading a kind of complicated letter, email from the state saying that there are going to be opportunities to extend.
I mean, given that we got the money in 2021, I guess.
Yeah.
No,
but
it's not that.
There's a lot of towns and I think cities are in the same boat where they haven't spent everything yet. And there's projects that are longer projects, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see some kind of extension.
But we don't wanna count on it.
We should have a discussion about it and,
Do we have anything written on what the allocation is? I know Roger was saying earlier today, it's sort of complicated. If you
Yeah.
Send us something and then
So-
we'll see it.
we have it on our ARPA page from, which you can link to from the select board page. And what we have, just a quick refresher for everyone, we were allocated originally $276,000 and $190. The funds that we have already allocated and have spent fully in their entirety that I'm aware of are the $55,000 for the
Rescue Five, yeah.
Rescue 5, the 17,979 to Southern Berkshire Ambulance, 90,991 to the Parks Commission Playground, and that was the final cost of the project.
4,000 for site analysis of Fox River.
Yes, and I'm not 100% sure if that bill came in at exactly 4,000,
That was a good question.
but we're working on figuring that out.
And
33,000 for the community center matching funds.
Yes.
And then we had 15,000 for the Renewable Energy Working Group, 10,500 for the Historical Society. And that leaves about $50,000 to cover or to
Put towards.
put towards the construction of the pavilion. And also, if we decide to do so, any overages in any other projects.
The 15,000 for the renewable energy working group was actually spent, was it not? No,
No, we've only spent, I don't know the exact figure, but I bet not even 1,000 of that.
oh, okay,
Because about the same time, shortly after that was allocated, we got a $15,000 grant from DOER.
right,
And that was funds to investigate potential for community shared solar on municipal land.
which is the
A
direction we
municipal
went,
community
right, yeah.
shared solar. That's its purpose, that's all it can be spent on. So we started drawing on that, and it kind of turned into this RFP for the closed landfill. And at the time, we asked that the ARPA funds be dedicated to the firehouse project. The firehouse project is stalled, so part of my reason for being here tonight is to let you know that the state allocation has a time limit on it, which is September, and we're told that they can't extend it. So my question is, since the house project is stalled, can we use ARPA funds to continue working on the landfill?
What remains to do the
It's all just like one step at a time consultation with Beacon.
Gotcha.
And I think we probably, I don't know the exact figure, but it's probably maybe 10 that we've spent of the 15.
Wow, okay.
So, she just bills us monthly. And, the RFP is out there. We have a site visit scheduled for tomorrow morning at 11. And I believe the date for proposals is the end of the month, 28th maybe, or 26th. So we want to keep going, and we'll need money to do it. If in fact DOER says, okay, time's up. So that's one thing.
I'm so excited that you had as much response as you did.
Yep.
I mean, we'll see at the end of the day.
Yeah, one
it's all
step at a
good, but
time.
yeah. But it's still exciting because you could have had no interest.
Good, could be good. So let's see, also, I wanted to express the working group's support of Dennis's potential grant application for a municipal charging station. That would be a vote of the group, except I'm 0 for 3 in the last several weeks for gathering a quorum. So we didn't vote, but I feel pretty confident saying that we support this whole idea of getting a charging station, which probably best located somewhere right near the town offices or near the pavilion or the firehouse. They're both 3-phase, except, proximate, so that's good. And they're, easy places to use. So that's our feeling on that project at this time. I don't know if Dennis has anything to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. We took a look at the possibility of an EV or electric vehicle charging station by looking at federal and state grants. And the federal grant turned out to be very similar to the state, with the exception that it requires a 20% match.
Versus the state,
So-
which is,
Pardon me?
versus the state, which is a what percent match?
A 0 match.
Well, I guess I prefer that one.
And I think also, in terms of competitiveness, it's, in this particular case, preferable to be more competitive closer to home by going after a state grant compared to competing with 50 other or 49 other states throughout the country. So had some preliminary contact with the state just to get some background information, and they will fund up to $50,000 for both purchase and installation of an EV charging station. Now, the type of station, there are 3 types basically: level 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 being a very slow charge, 2 sort of a medium charge, and level 3, which is basically commercial, is a supercharge, similar to the ones that Tesla has at the Big Y in Lee. So the idea would be to apply for this grant, and it doesn't have a deadline. It's on a rolling basis, dependent on the amount of money still left that was allocated by the state for this purpose.
Do you know how much was originally allocated and what's left?
No, we don't. I think they like to keep that a little to themselves.
Yeah.
Understandable.
How much, so up to, you said 50K? What does
50K.
it cost to put one of these? in?
Well, that's what we'd have to do further
Okay.
research, assuming that it would be in a location, as Peter suggested, either the pavilion or at town hall, depending on what it would cost in both cases and compare and make a decision. And the type of EV charger. If you look at a map that the state has for charging stations throughout the Commonwealth, there are a bunch in Berkshire County, but there are multiples of that bunch in other counties and throughout the state. Had some preliminary contact with Peter's help at Stockbridge. I thought it would be better to kick the tires of these things if they're closer to home rather than traveling to Boston. Not that I wouldn't like to go to Boston for another reason, but so we're at the point where we can do the research, and the idea would be to come up with a project that would fit that $50,000.
And
If
this
that's
is the state
possible.
grant with no match?
No,
All
Is that-
sounds good.
Yeah, is that doable? Like,
Well, it depends what stage you're in.
well, that's exactly what I was
If
saying.
if you go with like, the Tesla, what they have at, sorry about that.
Like what they have. in
Big Y,
Yeah.
it's gonna be more than 50,000.
Yeah, right.
But if you do like what Tesla calls it the Gen 2, you know, you can, it's like having a dryer, you can take a 48 amp, and you can get fairly good miles out of it per hour doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the idea would be, depending on the type of EV charging station, some companies say, well, you have to commit to 24 hours availability. However, there might be an opportunity to get an exemption for only 12 hours,
Oh, you mean when people can use
when
it?
people can actually work.
Ah, okay.
The idea would be, I would think from a security point of view, the shorter the period of time, especially if, for example, it was here at Town Hall, we have a police car right outside. Not that anything would happen, but you don't want to take the chance.
Mhm.
My gut feeling is that town hall makes a lot more sense, because if we ever had an employee who had an electric vehicle, they could use it. People could use it and go to the store, the library. And we already have
That's true.
cameras. In theory,
In Middle River.
in theory. In 2030 maybe, that's the 6-year plan. And we have cameras already on town hall parking lot. So if there's a security issue, we could even do it 24 hours and put the cameras, just so everyone knows, the cameras are not inside town hall, they're just in the parking area, but.
You can put the breaker on a timer, close it from midnight to 6 or something like that.
I should mention this would be available to the public.
And does one, like, I don't know how those work. If you plug in at the big Y station, do you pay for it?
Oh,
or
yeah,
is it free to the person?
you have to have a Tesla account.
Okay.
You plug in, it recognizes your car, and the way it goes, they're getting 39 cents a kilowatt over there.
There's no town financial commitment.
As far as I know from reading the literature,
I can't see any reason why we wouldn't.
There's
support.
zero downside to this, as I see it. It's
Well, I
not-
think you'll eventually get your police cars to be electric too, so, and it's gonna grow, so I think it's no harm in asking for it.
Yeah.
That's not.
I think we're all in favor of that. Thank you, Dennis, for looking into that. To return to the 15,000 for the renewable energy working group, I personally feel like we put it towards the idea of renewable energy. The meta grant, which you applied for, was kind of a gift out of the sky, and just in some ways kind of, was spent instead of the ARPA funds. But if there's other, work that you want to do as a renewable energy working group, I feel like the ARPA funds should be available to you and not be limited to just the fire station
Good.
solar.
I would second that.
Yeah. That being said, I think the question would just be, what's the timeline, how much money do you need? Because
We have to spend it.
if the towns put on a deadline of spending it by 2025, 2026, and you say, okay, it looks like we're gonna need 5,000 or 10,000. Or maybe you need all 15 or the 14 that's remaining, but we wouldn't want to allocate, the 14,000 remaining dollars, and then you only really need 5,000 more.
I think with the RFP, with response to the RFP, I think there's reasonable chance that we will have chosen a vendor. And then maybe at fall town meeting, we can have a vote to approve the project that vendor has proposed. There's a lot of steps after that. It has to clear DEP and it has to do a lot of other stuff. And I'm sure we will still rely on Beacon for all those steps. But, so it's hard for me to say and make an estimate of what the cost would be. But we've been talking to Beacon for over a year. And, we haven't spent 15. We have this new initiative with Mass Energize to create Energize Monterey, but there are some small fees for our interaction with that nonprofit, Mass Energize, but they're in the hundreds of dollars. So, we might use some of the funds for that. And my understanding was calendar year 26, you have to spend the money.
Till December 2026. That sounds right. So we could move all the 14,000, or not, just readjust the purpose.
That would be ideal for us. Yeah.
I mean, it does, the purpose says consultation about bringing solar power to Monterey, which is, I would say, pretty general.
Mhm.
And more or less covers all the things you're talking about so far.
Right.
With the exception of the charging station, but we're not talking about using ARPA money for that, so.
That all sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
As we get closer to the deadline and we get a sense for other projects, we may follow up. And as we learn more about this, the deadline for obligating or allocating the funds,
Mhm.
I don't know what the process will look like. Like I said, I got an email from the state, but it was a little bit complicated, and it was discussing potential extensions because towns are in this situation where we're in a years-long project, and we don't know exactly what it's gonna look like or how much exactly it's going to cost, but we wanna support it with the ARPA funding, so. In general, I think we're all on the same page of use it to pay for Beacon when the meta grant runs out. Use it for other things the renewable energy working group sees fit about bringing solar power to Monterey. And then we may need to clarify that or
Sure.
in the future, depending on what the requirements are.
Good. Well, I expect the next thing that we will come to the select board with is a recommendation with respect to any proposals.
That's exciting.
So we'll see.
By the way, we went back and forth about this a few months ago, but I don't think that the lease needs to be approved by town meeting, although we might think that it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, we did go back and forth about it, but
And I think, if I recall, ultimately, Beacon and town council agreed, we don't need to go back to,
It's
The
not
town.
required.
it's not required, because we had voted that the select board could sign a lease.
Right.
But it might make sense if we get the RFP in August to just put it on the warrant, to ensure that there's public support at town meeting.
Well, I think that, I think it would just be good form to ask the town meeting to vote on the project, once we know what the project is.
We'll plan on doing that then
Yeah.
in November.
I mean, it's one thing for the town to have voted to authorize the select board to enter into an agreement, but once we know the specifics of it, although I don't recall the exact response from town council and Beacon, but
I think the hardest thing will be knowing what those contracts are like how do we, if you're voting on, being asked to vote on something, you wanna know exactly what you're voting on, and, having looked at some of those proposals, they're not it's not a 2-page trivial contract.
the RFP is 82 pages.
This is my point,
Yeah.
and so realistically, are we talking about sending everybody the entirety of that contract as part of the warrant?
I
Are
think
we
that,
talking about just saying asking a general statement of approval and posting it somewhere they can refer to it, like?
I think that, we might make the document accessible, and, the usual 5 or fewer people will look at it. And I'd take it as our job to present a summary before town meeting, in writing before town meeting, in person at town meeting, just so people know what they're getting into in summary terms, not
I would
all the
even say,
details.
I think it would be great if you'd be willing to, write something for the Monterey News and follow it up with a meeting, maybe like at the library,
Sure.
to before town meeting, to answer questions, because I think a lot of times the people, those 5 people that really do delve in, if their questions are adequately answered, things go smoother.
Sure, yep, that's our job.
I will throw out one other idea, because I think that transparency and the public being on the same page is important. But like you said, very few people read it, even when it's on a town meeting warrant. And I did go back to the emails from May. Donna reviewed everything and said the matter need not go back to town meeting. The authorization of the October meeting is sufficient to empower the select board to move forward on terms and conditions acceptable to the board. She said, she continued on to say, typically select boards do not go back to town meeting once this level of discretion has been authorized. And then Beth said, thanks Donna, excellent news. That being said, if for some reason we want to achieve public transparency and support and address any questions and concerns, what we could do is post the winning RFP on the town website and email blast it out and put it on the Google group and in the Monterey News for the month of
Whenever they get it,
September,
right,
and
yeah.
say that there's a public information meeting at the end of September where the Renewable Energy Working Group and the select board will address any questions and concerns.
Mhm.
And if you can't make the meeting, you can send in an email or a letter.
Mhm.
I'm just throwing that out there in the case that waiting until November is an unnecessary delay, and we could still achieve answering public questions and concerns and putting it out there for public review, without having to wait till November. I don't know if that matters. I'm just putting it out there as an.
I kinda liked it too, and as I recall, it wasn't a close vote. It was a pretty I mean, there were a couple of people who didn't support it, but it was, do you remember what the numbers were in the October? I mean, you can go look it up. but-
I don't. I mean, I think it ultimately comes down to, does waiting till November adversely affect our, contractor?
I don't think,
It doesn't.
having a proposal and accepting a proposal is a step along the way to the developer signing a contract that involves a negotiation with National Grid. And, you know, there's a whole series of steps.
Mhm.
We won't know, for example, which I think would be of prime interest to voters, what are we going to get from it? We won't know that until the negotiation with National Grid is complete, because this developer is going to be part of a pilot project. It's not a typical installation. So there's a lot of give and take to arrive at a contract.
Mhm.
And if we have a proposal, I think that give and take to come up with a contract, we won't be waiting. They won't be waiting on us, we'll be waiting on them. Because it's a unique situation, because of the saturated substation, I think it will take a while to work out those details, and I think that what most people will want to know is how's it going to benefit the town? Because that's part of what we're hoping to come up with as a CSS, community shared solar. It may be that limitations of scale make it not viable as a community shared solar. Then we might want to say, well, okay, we've done our due diligence and it doesn't work on this municipal property to have a community shared solar. Supposing we put that aside and say, let's just generate the electricity here for its own sake, not, and the, you know, that creates a different situation for the developer financially.
So since there's so many unknowns, it would seem to me like our approving it, 2 months is 2 months. Especially if there's all these additional negotiations to be navigated. It would seem to me like it makes more sense for us to do it the way you described. I mean, you're saying the additional 2 months won't matter, but it would seem to me.
I'm only
They
saying
can't
that
go-
that's my expectation based on the 2.5 years it took to get to an RFP.
But I'm just saying that once we have that RFP and we have people that are interested and we're at the point of choosing one of those people. And then after we choose them, there's still all of this negotiation. I would hate to make that negotiation wait 2 months to begin. When at the end of the day, we don't actually even know how that will come out. Like, better to push it forward.
Well, how about this, Peter?
Accepting the
Yeah.
proposal is the first step in that.
Right, but.
And once we accept the
Push it
proposal,
out 2 more months.
they can start
Right.
their
This is my
negotiating.
point. That's why I would rather have us just accept the proposal if we think it's good. Because that extra time is extra time that soon, we'll know sooner.
Sure, good. I would be happy to do, you know, take all those steps, writing about it, inviting public comment, having a meeting about it, keep people informed, but people get impatient with the process and they want to know
Yeah.
what are we going to get out of it.
Well,
They won't learn that at that informational meeting.
Yeah. Let's stay in touch about what, especially when we get the RFPs back. And when you speak with Beth, or whoever you're working with at Beacon, you can let her know that we're kind of contemplating, should we vote on it again at town meeting, or should we go this other route of public information? And then also simultaneously, what you can do for us is think about those ARPA funds and what the plan for that looks like, and maybe just mention it to Beth, if you haven't already, that when the Meta grant is cut off, we're gonna switch to ARPA funds.
We've already been having
Okay.
that conversation.
Okay, so we'll go forward with that.
She knows that we want to keep the project going and that we need them, her, Beacon to do that, so.
If that's, are you comfortable with where we're
Sure.
at? Okay.
Yeah.
Another,
What's the, do I recall correctly that the historical society said they were gonna need more than a 10,000?
yeah, so I got an email from Rob, well, I sent an email to get an email from Rob Hoops. And he said, speaking of the first historical commission meeting since we made new appointments for the fiscal year, which there was significant turnover in the historical commission.
Right.
He said, we discussed applying for a grant from Houstonic Heritage matched by funds from special meeting to make up the deficit left after the 10,500 ARPA funds. I spoke with Dan Bolignani on Monday and he was very positive about such a grant. I've also contacted the potential consultant to ask for a written proposal and fee so we know how much we really need. We'll keep the select board in the loop. So it sounds like, and he said in the next couple of weeks, we'll get hopefully that proposal. I need to follow up, I guess, because if they're really right about the $15,000 proposal and we have the 10,500 allocated from ARPA,
We'd have to raise some from.
we have to raise some at special meeting, so the next question is, do we wanna raise some at special meeting, or do we wanna move other ARPA funds around? Which,
And really, we'd be moving it from the community center, because that's really the only pool left.
is from the community center, from potentially renewable energy working group, if we decide that 9,000 more gets us through 2026.
And this, if it wasn't actually built.
And the Fox Hill analysis, if it didn't reach the full 4,000, but I am confident that the others reached their full amount, so I think at this point, we will continue to think about renewable energy working group and what the next couple of years look like. For the community center pavilion, we have that 29,000 from the special article for lighting, which we're gonna transfer. And it seems like between that and the ARPA funds, we're probably still gonna need some town meeting funds. And then we'll talk to, hopefully we have more information from the historical commission in a couple of weeks. So we can decide how we wanna move forward. Because in some ways, it might also make a lot of sense to go for that maybe $1,500 or $2,000 from town meeting to match the Houstonic Heritage funds and get us the full 15, so we just need a little more information there, but this new historical commission or this revamped historical commission, I think is jumping in.
What's the timeline for when the design phase closes and then the next phase goes forward? What's that next phase timeline?
Yes, the proposal, the design proposal,
Right,
has a term of 2 to 3 months. We compressed it, recognizing that in the fall, maybe around October, November timeline,
right,
the construction grant program will kick in.
right.
So, in fact, we're talking with the engineers of the project tomorrow.
Okay.
Even though we don't have an agreement with the state, but their paperwork is delayed for internal reasons. But they've given us the okay to expense
Right,
the funds. So the idea would be to get that 2 to 3 month period to come up with the design and the bid package so that we can put that into the construction grant application, all that information, similar to the culvert project. Yeah.
okay. Which would be that deadline's in October or opens in October?
It depends, but it's in the mid to late fall.
Okay.
For example, last year, the application had to be submitted by December 14th.
Okay.
So there's usually about a month and a half period for preparation and submission.
Okay.
So October, November, it probably hit the street, so to speak.
Okay, so I think at this point, what we'll do is figure out more from the historical commission as they learn more about the consultant and the potential Housatonic Heritage Grant. And then I think basically the community center pavilion project will eat up whatever we can give it that's
Yeah.
left over. At the same time, if we can fully fund another project and take a little bit from the community center, it may make sense because we're a ways out and we likely need to raise money for the pavilion in any case.
Yeah.
So a few $1,000s to completely do one project may matter more to that project than it does to the community center, and then we can come up with a final figure
No, I see.
there.
Yeah, I agree with your
Yeah.
analysis.
You know, here again, I'm not speaking for the community center. We have a chair and a director, so they have to be part of the discussion.
But you gave us the broad outlines of what
Yes.
the timeline looks like, which is what we were asking.
Good.
Alright, thank
I'm all
you.
set with you again.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yep.
Thank
Good
you.
luck at the
Always
site
a pleasure.
visit tomorrow.
Yeah,
Site visit, yeah, we'll see.
we're keeping our positive thoughts.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
Dennis,
tonight.
thank you for all your background research and the stuff you bring to us, it's great.
Well, with Peter's help, we'll get some of this done. For
I-
solar.
But you keep plugging in new things and I love it.
Alright, thank you. Have a good night. The next item is the letter of support for the EMS regionalization, which we tabled a week. And
So on the one, I basically, at the end of the day, I'm willing to sign it. I have deep reservations. Why is Berkshire County the only county that's just looking at EMS shared services? The entire rest of the state, well, okay, maybe not parts of Franklin County. All of the rest of the state has combined fire EMS. And it's bizarre that there's now like 4 different studies about just EMS. And I'm like, the whole country's it's not just Massachusetts even, like there's so much data indicating that it makes a lot more sense to combine these services that I don't even understand why they've been looking at this. We're not obliged to do anything, and sitting at the table, we get to find out what they're doing. But I'm not really thrilled about waiting to find out what they find out to make decisions, and I have reservations about even the idea of it, but at the same time, there doesn't seem to be a downside.
There's no cost to it, so we might learn something from it.
could you also go and express that concern?
I think it's a fair question, right at the gate, why are we just doing EMS? It's the same thing. It's a manning shortage, it's volunteer, huh?
It's definitely.
Staff.
Okay, staffing shortage. Old school.
I don't know.
But the staffing, it's the same thing. And two, is they can do both.
They can?
Yeah.
Right, so I just felt important to put that out there, and I don't feel like we should wait to proceed with other possibilities while this is ongoing.
Well, I
But
think-
I don't see the downside to being at the table and hearing what they're doing and being able to express that opinion in another forum.
Well, we have to appoint a representative to the task force. Are you willing to be that? Because I feel like you have done the most regarding
I'm
ambulances.
absolutely willing to do that.
That's fine with me.
I think that, I mean, you did the deep dig into.
I'm totally
into-
willing, I have complete buy-in, and I like, I know that, I spoke to Sean about it, he's not happy with it because, again, he feels like it's a waste of effort to have another study that's just EMS based, and, what I already expressed. But I agree with, like, it's not like I'm just respouting his words, I came to the same conclusion independently. But at the same time, this is what the other towns are doing, right? So you got Stockbridge, West Stockbridge, Richmond doing one, we've got the town managers group doing one, there's Smithy Pignatelli, like, and everybody's just looking at it. And so far, like the most reliable group around that's functional and stable is Lee, which has shared services.
Has what?
Shared services and both EMS and fire under one roof and has firefighter paramedics, like. Here's a successful model. Let's not do that. Let's just put them
Well,
separate.
some people, they feel they have to rediscover it themselves. They don't like to copy.
But also we
I
have,
copied a lot more.
but they're already separate, right? They're already separate and they don't, there's resistance to undoing that. So
We had this, but we talked in the last week's meeting about bringing some people, whether Otis and New Marlboro, bringing some of those select boards and I call it round discussion, table discussion, just to get people's thought, get stuff out on the table.
And I did express that to Sean, who's out of town for quite a few days. He's asked to meet tomorrow at 5. I don't know yet if Roger can join us, to talk about what his conversation with Otis ended up being and how he thinks would be the best way to go forward with negotiations with the Otis Select Board and conversations, I should say.
Yeah, Mickey.
I was just wondering, because you're talking Monterey, Otis, and New Marlboro, would you include Sandusville in that? Because that seems to be like, to me, I've always thought of that would be, because you asked one time what would be the logical group. To me, that's a logical group.
Very, very possibly, I think, right now, there's a kind of vacuum down there, but maybe it will
Well,
get
they
filled
have,
in.
yes,
Did they ever name a town there?
it's a big suck.
They have a temporary one, or what do you call that, an interim,
No.
that apparently has applied for the position, I found out from Roger today. I'm not opposed to it.
It's just logical, because they would be, they're not connected to anybody else.
Logistically, it 100% makes sense.
They got borders.
Like, whether or not the voters of Sandusfield would, support a project where they had to carry some of the bill is still in question, given that they just refused to deal with their problems with their ambulance, and a week later, the ambulance failed on a call.
I was gonna say, they have a.
They've repeatedly demonstrated a lack of enthusiasm for funding both the personnel and the.
That's standard down there anyway.
So the question is whether or not they're in a political position to proceed with that choice. But that would mean we wouldn't offer it, right?
And it's in the.
And I think they will definitely be included in the conversation.
Yeah.
Just it's impossible to predict how it will go.
Well, we'll start by signing this and then,
Sorry, I'll just include more information.
let's go to, I promise a short meeting.
So,
You
but
know I always stick to it.
Susan, so where we talked about reaching out to the other select board,
And that's what that's part of what I wanna ask, is I want some clarity on how the conversation went with the Otis Fire EMS people and what the fire chief thinks is, a foundation, the what's on the table when we go forward to open that conversation. And I just think it's good to get some perspective.
okay. So is their fire chiefs, is the EMS there is separate than the fire, right?
But that, as far as I understand it, that's a question even within the town Otis, because.
Well, I was
There's
told
always
that
political
if you go through Otis's budget, what they put online, I think they gave them like $240,000 for the EMS services. But it seemed to be separate of the fire,
It is,
so.
it's an independent company.
Yeah, it's an independent company. But you saw the notes that I sent to
Yeah.
Roger, so.
And these situations are so complicated, but we have to start somewhere.
Well, we have to start somewhere, and look, everybody's suffering, so it doesn't look as pretty as you want it to be. The question, I think, we have to have complete transparency. I don't, if I said, what do your financials look like, they share the information. you know it's not gonna probably be ideal, but you gotta know where you're starting from.
Yeah.
You can't be, behind the closed doors, you wanna know where they're starting from and what are we shooting for, because it's not only them, it's a larger group now, so.
I'd just like to have it from both sides. I'd like to hear what the fire and EMS people are thinking, or maybe it's three sides.
Yeah.
The fire people, the EMS people, and the political side as
Yeah, I
well.
mean, it's a shared responsibility.
Exactly.
I agree with that. But going in, there has to be ways to measure, and
Performance.
performance, yeah, we gotta measure performance and put it on the table. How do we improve it? Where do we invest? There's all these kinds of questions, but if it's not transparency, it's gonna be sort of like what happened with the school system, that's opinion, but, so I think that, that when we go into it, we need to, talk about that. It is what it is, but. Okay.
Okay, November special town meeting items, I just wanna run through kind of my list and see if there's any additions. I'm probably might put together just a very beginning draft, or just start through, and we don't need to discuss any of them in depth, but just if there's anything, I just wanna put this all on your radar and see if there's anything that you think or wanna add. Susan brought up the 5-year recycling contract for the November special town meeting.
And I'm hoping that it will be complete in time for that. I will reach out to Matt and find out.
And if not, it will just go on May.
Yeah, well, it won't be our fault, because I'm not negotiating it, it's the executive.
Bylaw review committee, David and I have been back and forth a little bit today about just a couple of things that we mentioned at last week's meeting, but we're hoping that will be on the November meeting. The $29,000 for the community center, we might be in a position to transfer, or we may not be. It might happen in May. I think it depends on where we're at with the feasibility study. I think it's probably more likely to happen in May.
That seems like it. Because it doesn't seem like we'll have a clear number on the
Construction
project,
cost.
yeah.
What we'll probably do in May is transfer the 29,000 and raise, if we need to, and I'm kind of assuming we need to.
Whatever the gap is.
The difference. The next item would be the fiscal year 24 audit, so we took the available funds and we're funding the fiscal year 22 audit. We'll need to raise funds for the fiscal year 24 audit, which is gonna be about 18,500. I think we've all been agreeable to that in principle.
Yep.
Park grant. So to get the money back for the open space and recreation plan, we had to apply for a park grant to improve the Bidwell Park. And there's a match required, and I believe the match is in the neighborhood of 5,000 to 6,000, or maybe that's the full
I
project.
think that's the full project, I think it's
So it might
like
be like
3,500 or something.
Yeah, 2,000 or 3,000. And we just need to put that on the warrant. If it doesn't pass, we still get reimbursed for the open space recreation
Right.
plan. So depending on where we're at, we may decide we don't want it to pass, but we've done what we need to do to get reimbursed
Right.
for the open space and recreation plan, which costs a lot more. That's on the table.
Right.
The senior tax work off abatement increase, which we tried to do at the select board level and realized, okay, it actually needs a town meeting vote, is kind of a housekeeping item. The solar lease of the cap landfill that Peter was just in here to discuss,
Which
I think that
we
depends
should-
on
yeah,
timing.
It does, but I'm leaning towards not putting it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if he has the information meeting.
If we don't have
it in
to,
the
and-
library,
yeah.
I think the things you pointed out, that, it's getting a long list.
Yeah,
Special stabilization funds for the retiree need to go to OPEB. I still have yet to fully nail down what that number is. And we'll transfer those funds to OPEB, and then we'll be done with the special retiree health and life stabilization. And then Susan, you've talked about short-term rental regulation.
I'm thinking the piece that might make sense to tackle would be LLCs, or I shouldn't just say LLCs, would be basically corporate ones, like, and I'm not sure what people have done to try to distinguish between what I'll call a family LLC. Right, so I need to investigate that a little further, but specifically, like, I know that there's several already in Monterey that are just investment groups that have purchased a building to run as a hotel. And, you know, they sort of make this marginal claim, well, one of us might retire there someday.
Right.
Exactly, yes, that.
You said
Yes, I'm
you
down.
said what we thought.
So are you looking into that still for November?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the only other
I'm
one,
hoping it won't be lengthy.
the only other thing on my radar, which if it's very full, we won't address it, but Lake Garfield Working Group, based on the conversation at town meeting, based on the revised mission of the Lake Garfield Working Group and that process we went through to get to that with the Lake Garfield Working Group, they did kind of request being not just an ad hoc group. They now have a budget that's gonna be probably in the $30,000 to $50,000 plus range. They're taking on more responsibility.
Do we wanna call them commission?
Well,
Or are we keeping?
I don't know that we wanna do anything.
Okay,
But, and certainly the idea of them being an elected body was thrown around. My gut feeling is that's not a good idea because we have a hard time getting people to run for seats. And there's a lot more flexibility if they're appointed by the select board. It also keeps very clear the idea that the select board is the final sign off on NOIs, on funding, on strategies for Lake, which I think is, the checks and balances are important on a controversial topic like this, so.
plus I think it gives us the ability to balance the membership.
Yes.
Between, you know, a little more flexibility between lake residents, non-lake residents, and I think there's at least one other group on there.
Yeah, so what we might just do is solidify the group. But maybe if we wanna put that in the bylaws, that isn't for this meeting, because we're not gonna do any bylaw changes at this meeting because we're doing the whole bylaw review. So that's the only other thing on my radar, but I don't know if I'm missing anything.
Nothing.
Okay. Well, we'll start getting a warrant together in the next
That seems
month.
like a lot already.
Well, I know some things like pavilion funding's probably not happening.
Right,
The solar lease at Cap landfill may not happen, so there are a couple of things up in the air. And then, I mean, the recycling contract, that's housekeeping, the senior work off, that's housekeeping.
some of these are easy, but
Yeah.
it's still a lot to be done.
So,
yeah.
that's all I have for that. Is there any other unanticipated business?
Yes, so I did, meet today with the comm center rep, and she's great, and we went through Mary had made comments and they had highlighted questions. There are a few things I think we're probably gonna need to have select board, input on, as we change them. And the one that I wanted to bring to your attention, because I want you guys to think, I mean, you may have an off the cuff answer, but it may be something you wanna think about, if there's at least a couple. One would be the format, so they're recommending that rather than having like the standard manual start to finish, that we have, basically a compendium of policies. Policies be put on the webpage somewhere, which Roger thinks that's easy, but it'll give us something to populate the HR page. And that would have a sort of like introduction, because people typically don't read the manual start to finish anyway. They go and consult whatever sections are relevant to whatever issue they're having. And I felt like my piece of that was that we should at the very least have a sort of, I'll call it an introduction at the beginning that sort of sets the tone for like, this is how we believe people should be handled as employees or whatever. Because if it's no more than 2 or 3 pages, the person might, a new employee might actually read it. But do we wanna do that? Do we wanna stay with the manual? or do we wanna transition to a compendium of policies? And I think their basic concept is that the policies are, it's easier to change individual policies rather than revamping the whole thing.
I would say the policy would be the way to go.
That was my inclination as well, but,
Something's always gonna get changed.
but they have a bunch of freestanding policies that can be modified, and they've recommended we adopt some of them. How much do you want on that?
Right now,
Like, I
Yeah.
can, not necessarily giving it to you now, but do you, for example, would you like me to write up the notes of the or write up a brief version of the notes of the conversations that are the hit points and let you guys know? Do you wanna do that now? Do you wanna do it, like, I'm happy to do it and send it out to you. I definitely have like a list of questions to think about. Something like, do you really think that new employees should only get 5 days of vacation in
No.
the first year,
No.
for example? And, right, that would be one I think we're all agreed on. And maybe a few other things that, like, pondering we played with the idea of merit increase versus COLA increase versus, longevity increases, that was another thing that came up. And I mean, there's all this thing about it, there's my personal thing, there's what she said, I get to do any of that, or not. But at some point, the board as a whole is gonna have to, anything that we're changing or thinking of changing will have to be a board conversation. She's gone for a week, so we'll be doing the next pass at this in a couple weeks. She's gonna try and pull together the stuff that we did, today. So we'll have another concrete thing with hit points, and I have a bunch of questions for Roger that I've already sent to him. So that's all I'm saying, like, how do we wanna handle it?
I'm happy with you mostly taking it on and coming back for like critical questions of.
That we might, or set a priority, the ones we should try to answer first.
Right.
Yeah, and we all know, I mean, we don't all know, but I assume we're not gonna keep 5 days of vacation, that's just outdated.
I'm pretty sure it should be 2 weeks, that seems to be the normal
Yeah.
opening.
And I know that some of these things are very standardized, and Collins Center will probably be like, this is just the market rate right now. But you want to, like, I think we're gonna meet again in 2 weeks, not next week. We could put on the agenda, like, review kind of personnel policies or whatever they end up being called.
So why don't I send you some of the questions I thought were likely to need select board input?
Yeah.
And I think we were thinking to meet possibly later in that week, because she'll just have come back from vacation. So I may not have stuff from her yet. But that's fine, then I can just give her the.
Okay. I don't have anything, I haven't heard back from the fire company, so.
Did we ever get anything back from the treasurer regarding the bank?
You brought that up.
Yeah, so we brought it up when we were doing contract negotiations, and she had said that she believed we were in some kind of a contract with Unibank,
Right.
but that we could potentially work with somebody else. So I will, based on the contract, I'm not really supposed to reach out to her, so I'll ask Roger to reach out to her, about.
Right.
Well, we talked about different, looking at another, or talking to another bank.
But if we're in a contract, at least we could maybe find a different agent
Yeah.
within the same bank.
And she was somewhat confident that there are people at Unibank that could help explain things to us in a way that's understandable and clear.
And maybe send us documents about it.
Yeah.
Like, just putting it out there. Not to, be big.
Minor detail.
I will, yeah, we'll follow up on that.
Okay.
And then, come debt service,
Cause it's coming down the,
in November, we'll have Mickey here to crunch all the numbers. If only we could hire Mickey to be as
an advocate for all of
particular
them,
about
yes.
all of the debt items. In addition to the library loan, because the library loan, there's not a cent missing, ever.
That's all.
Following the dollars.
Yeah.
Paying attention somewhere along the line.
We can have you as the debt babysitter.
I'd rather have the money rather than the debt, you know? I don't believe in debt after a certain point in your life, but
I hear
I
you.
know that.
it disturbs me greatly when I hear people like, "God damn it, you're kidding me." You know, you shouldn't be trying to pay off a house when you're 87 years
Oh
old,
my
lady,
gosh.
you know, it's like, doesn't work. And I know too many people have done that, it just scares me, you know?
Scares me too.
Yeah,
How about people carrying what the kind of credit card debt they're carrying? It's so scary.
yeah, I just.
So,
We'll look at the minutes of July 9th quickly. I don't have the other ones ready.
that's fine. You do an awesome job of minutes, so. I sent out my
You signed it.
comments.
Mistakes, good. July 30th, yeah. Yep. All looks good to me.
Oh, they were not. Gotcha.
Okay.
Alright,
I move we approve the minutes of 7/9/24 as amended.
I second the motion.
we'll call vote,
Yes,
Yes.
and yes,
Yes.
look at us. Crazy up to date.
comments and questions from the public?
I am, to put it mildly, extremely upset about what's going on down my hill with the roadside store parking. I'm looking at this as possibly being another one of these, somebody in Monterey picking on somebody else in Monterey, because we're saying that this parking is dangerous and blah, blah, blah. That parking has been going on right there for many, many, many years. And I have seen, all right, so I've seen 10 cars there now. Maybe before I don't remember counting them before, I probably did because I count things. Which is probably why I follow the dip. But shutting that off caused more problems and was detrimental to roadside store than just leaving it or saying, you know, putting a block so they can't, because it's dangerous, it gets further east. So you could say maybe, you know, like 8 or 9 cars can park there safely. But that, was it last Thursday when I went, somebody mentioned it to me and I went down the hill and I took a look and there were at that point 7 cars on Swan Road and 1 in the driveway, a big van in the driveway that goes to the well. And I understand that there are going to be cars sometimes parked in the Swan Road. It's not the safest thing. Somebody had mentioned to me, like, can a fire truck get by? And I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that. You know, and it was like, I certainly hope they can. I think they can. But there's also the problem of how they turn around. And my son was in town, I think Saturday, and he happened to be talking to somebody else before he came to my house. And he said, this person asked if when they go to roadsides, they could turn around in my driveway. And I go, absolutely, just, you know, because I got a driveway, you can just drive through. I said, I might go out there and charge a fee, you know, collect a little money so I don't get into debt, right? But, you know, there's that problem of how do people, when they get on Swan Road, how do they get out? You know, and the driveway down below me, which doesn't have a house attached to it, is not an easy driveway to deal with, so And, people might not notice that or even see it like, oh, I want to drive, And you just could end up, lost up that hill. But really and truly, it's shutting off that parking totally on 23, I think is just extremely wrong and not the attitude we should have in this town to be doing that. That is our only commercial establishment in this town. It's the only place you could buy anything in this town, except you go to a small artisan, buy something at the pottery place. But, I just think it's so wrong, and they'll be open tomorrow. And I just think those things should be moved so that some people can park and we're not having, a total, and when that was blocked off, there were also cars parked. I think there might have been two that were going to roadside that were kind of parked in a pull-off spot in front of the, whatever it is, down the hill on my side. The extra, I still brought the garage.
So just so you know, Mickey, on Friday, the cones were moved, because on Thursday,
that.
they blocked everything. On Friday, they're estimating that between 5 and 6 cars can fit there. Next week, there is a meeting scheduled between the TA, Gould Farm, Jim, and Brian, Chief Fahey and Jim Hunt, it's an evolving situation. So I think at this point, it's looking like we think that if we can allow parking on the south side of 23 in the area where there isn't a drop off, so that people can stay off the road. We're increasing the attention from the police department to make sure that people are parking safely on that side of the road. They're gonna be discussing some other possible solutions as well. And I do wanna point out that I completely agree with you that people have parked there forever. I'm gonna give you one caveat. In the previous incarnation, it was, I'll find a better word, all curb cut. That whole area of the parking lot was even with the road. And if there were cars, it was true, I lived here too, and you could, if there were cars parked improperly and a vehicle going both ways on 23, it was very possible to move out of the way. And with the curb there now, there is less room, significantly
To do that,
less
yes,
room
I can understand
to do
that.
that.
Because I have to go far to make my turn. I used to cut halfway across the parking lot.
Everybody did, which, and I'm not saying that was a better system. I'm just saying the reality of the
But they
curb being
also,
where it is.
had much fewer parking spaces. I mean, they've got, I think, 13 there now. It's hard to count them driving by.
So I'm just asking you to give them a
I
little
know,
time
but
to
can
sort
we
it.
open it up? It's totally blocked off right now. Before they open tomorrow, can the cones be moved so some cars can park?
As far as, I believe.
No,
that
they're put back in place again.
I drove by, maybe yesterday, and there was space between the two sets of cones. But did you look right before this meeting?
I just came down that hill. I came down this hill yesterday and it was the same thing. It was blocked off. And Troy was here today as well, and he said, it's blocked off, Mom. Yep.
I had understood that the cones.
Somebody
had been left
moved
as
them
they
back
were.
again.
But the question is.
It had been opened up.
Yeah.
Saturday, I guess it was opened, and I don't know who moved them back.
I didn't see him here. Yesterday, I didn't see him yesterday.
So I hadn't heard that, so I will, we'll see what we can
Yeah,
find out.
there has to be some parking there, and.
Well, I agree with you, and I'm just letting you know, it's an active area of conversation, and hopefully next week there'll be some type of, at least temporary resolution until further conversations. I mean, I think it's gonna be an ongoing issue.
Encouraging them to park on a small dirt road isn't the best solution.
I think what we all want is for there to, I don't want us to have to change our mind after someone gets killed. So I would like us to find a good solution that is tenable. allows for parking and is the safest thing we can do. But I agree with you that just parking on Sloan Road has problems too. So what we have to do is explore what the options are and what possibilities there are. But I wanna give the main players in that the chance to have that
I
conversation.
understand that, but I wanted to bring this up to you just to know that, you know, I am definitely unhappy with it, and I have not spoken to any of my neighbors about it. Yeah, and as I said, it's not it's, blocking that off is not the answer. You know, you say it's blocking the road. Did you happen to drive from like my end of town to the center of town, the night of the fire picnic, the thing? Or,
Yeah,
yeah, they're parked on both sides of the road, and there's no parking, I mean,
Yeah.
there's only that much room on either side of the white line. And so they're in the middle of the road, and so there is like almost one lane. You know,
Mhm.
you don't have a big car.
Well, I guess between the book sale and the steak roast, I don't know what changed this year, but something was
Crazy.
different.
Yeah.
And there
We're
were
gonna blame,
problems.
we're gonna blame it on the coffee truck that was in front
yeah,
of the
people
store
brought
because
up the
it
issue
took
about-
up 4 spots or something.
Well, no, but the other was the way that people, I had 2 people say the way they stood in line going out to the street instead of coming along. the street.
Right.
Well,
Really?
And there's truth to that, because when I came back from the transfer station, there was people out in the street, you know, waiting, talking.
Well, you know what else changed? We didn't have curbing here until last year or the year before.
That's right,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so they
So
couldn't
they
park on
couldn't
that
park
side
on
there?
that.
Well, they do park.
Oh.
You ever see drive by during a Little League game or something? They do park, but it's not, we used to be able to trespass more, and now we can't
Test
trespass.
beds at all, right?
So,
And I will say this, on Friday, I drove past the roadside and John Field had a box truck, you know, pretty good size, not one of the enormous ones, but a good sized truck. They were right in front of us and they pulled into the roadside on the south side of the road and they were completely over the white line. If that truck can park there over the white line, any normal car ought to be able to do it. The problem is just because you ought to be able to do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who can't drive.
not everyone has a CDL.
Fair enough, but, and also I think, you know, there are spots there that you should, and so I think we need
Yeah,
to
I don't
find.
know if that can be filled in, but then you get back to the Conservation Commission.
Well, also, there's reason that, I mean, part of it is just the terrain, but part of it also is drainage, so I don't know, what, at the end of the day, I wanna give the main people
Yeah,
the
but, I mean,
chance to work it out.
All right, so let's make it not totally blocked by tomorrow for them.
I will, I
We
can't,
have
I don't
to
know when
follow
that'll
up with
take,
them and
but yeah.
Find out why it's not being.
Why
cleaned
it's
up.
The
not
police
being
should
kept up.
probably know, because the police would know.
Yeah, but they're not in till, what, 9 doesn't come in till 8:30 or
Well,
something.
Jen's on
They're
duty.
about
Oh, really?
7:30 or something.
Jen's on duty now.
Okay.
Is she out or is she in the building, do you know?
I saw her.
I thought-
I saw her come in when I,
Okay,
I
so,
thought I saw her pull out because her car was. right
yeah,
in
she was
front.
walking down the hallway as I was coming in, but I will,
Maybe we need a beach monitor.
yeah, right. So,
I hear he's doing a great job up there. He's picking up other business too, I hear. Which is how it should be.
Alright,
All right, that was, I just,
adjourn,
thanks for keeping us
Second
posted.
motion.
yeah, yes,
Yes,
Frank,
2 weeks, yes,
Second.
good night.
Frank votes,
Yes.
okay.
2 weeks.
We'll adjourn
Yeah.
in 7:16.
And hopefully you won't be in a panic over the wedding.